Make this a good intro, Chief. This scene needs all the help it can get.
Hi guys, we're in the middle of a storm in the UK, so you might hear some wind in the background, I'm not sure. But anyway, welcome to the channel again. Welcome to the subscribers and the non-subscribers who might subscribe after they've seen a few of my videos, I don't know. But this is a bit of a kind of love of my life kind of video. This is a video about Jim Henson. So Jim Henson means a hell of a lot to me, and hopefully by the end of this video you'll understand why. But someone did ask a few videos ago, one of my book haul videos, someone said, I'd love to see more about the books you have about Jim Henson. So that's what I'm doing today. So I think it's 10 videos. I think it's a round number, kind of. Yeah, this video is brought to you by the number 10.
10 it is.
Yeah, anyway. So, just to start off with, Jim Henson, who was he? So, I'm sure you guys know already, because this man is, rightfully so, an absolute legend. But he's a unique man, a very unique artist, and all sorts of things. Clearly, puppeteer, film director, writer, actor, businessman, all sorts of different things. And all of these things have combined to create what Jim Henson did, and the Jim Henson Company, and the Jim Henson Creature Shop, which is definitely going to be talked about here, because his legacy goes well beyond the Muppets, although clearly that's his most famous creation. And just to clarify something that I've heard before, the Muppets are what he called his puppets. So he decided to make them into a primetime family show and call it the Muppet Show, but he was calling them the Muppets before that. So when he did his original puppets, he called them Muppets. And soon after that, he created Sesame Street, and he called those puppets Muppets. And to be fair, Kermit the Frog was one of them in both those situations. So anyone that thinks that the Muppet term was created for the Muppet Show, him and his team had been using that term for a long time before that. So he was born in September 24th, 1936. And he was born in Mississippi, but then his teenage years he spent in Washington, and he started to do puppetry properly in his university days. And he was at the University of Maryland when he first started doing Sam and Friends, which was his first success. So he did this 5-minute film called Sam and Friends with his puppets, and this was his first kind of set of characters. That did include Kermit the Frog, actually, but Sam was the main one, who was this sort of bald man kind of guy. And this was his first foray into puppetry. And it's also how he met his wife as well, Jane. So Jane worked with him and worked very creatively on the writing side of it as well, with him on Sam and Friends. So in 1963, the Jimmy Dean show featured Ralph the Dog. So Ralph the Dog is clearly a very iconic puppet. It's actually my favourite puppet. Sorry, my favourite Muppet. It's my favourite Muppet, but very famous, obviously. Kermit Frog has already been established. Now in 1963, he's established Ralph the Dog, while he's doing these commercials, doing loads and loads of commercials with these puppets. And actually, there's one commercial he did back in the 60s, which featured a puppet that was pretty much the Cookie Monster, which is kind of interesting because it was like eating this machine that was connected to the advert. But anyway, obviously these ideas are coming through him before he gets to the point in 1969 when he creates Sesame Street with a group called the Children's Television Workshop, who wanted to do an educational program for children, and they wanted to use his Muppets, and they collaborated together. And obviously Sesame Street is enormous. It's shown in hundreds of countries, and it's been translated in hundreds of countries. It's a huge cultural phenomenon. It's what I showed my kids Sesame Street when they were kids. I grew up on it as well. What's interesting is it educates you as far as learning to spell and stuff like that, and numbers, maths and all that, maths and literacy. But it also teaches some moral stuff as well, and to be kind, to give, you know, the sort of power of giving, the power of being nice, being generous. and being okay about different people that are neighbours that are a bit different to you, or different family situations, like if you've got two dads, or if your nan is your mum, and things like that. That sort of thing was covered in the show as well. So it's a really important show for giving you a really good sense of morality as a kid. So Sesame Street, hugely important, and that was 1969. And soon after that, he really wanted to create a primetime family show, which is why he came up with the Muppet Show. And he actually went around loads of different American TV companies, and they all sort of rejected it. And it was the BBC that thought it was a great idea, and it was the BBC that kind of commissioned it or whatever. And it was made in London, which is kind of weird, isn't it? It was made in England, and that's part of the reason why some of the guests are who they are. And it's also some of the so one of the writers was an English writer as well. But it was a work of genius. The Muppet Show was a work of genius. I'm so pleased that Disney Plus put all 5 seasons on the Disney Plus channel. I'm really pleased they didn't really ban anything. There's only 2 that they didn't put on, and that was because of copyright reasons, not because of it being outdated. And if there was any episodes that were outdated, there was a little warning message, which is fine by me. I think that's a good way of doing it. So that was awesome. So it was great. So if you haven't seen the Muppet Show, which is the best version of the Muppets, I mean, the films are great. Really great, but the series is just uniquely crazy, and again, with everything Jim Henson did, it just fevers your imagination, and it's very funny. It just makes you smile. I smile just thinking about this stuff. So yeah, the Muppet Show was really, really important, and that ran for 5 seasons, and at its height, 200 million people saw it around the world, which is quite amazing. But obviously the Muppets are very well known, and they're still making films now. I personally think the 2 Disney Muppet films are great, the Muppet Movie and the Muppets Most Wanted. I think they're great films. I think they're totally in the spirit of the Jim Henson ideas, and I think it's a shame that Frank Oz isn't involved. Dave Goelz is still there, and sadly most of the other main puppeteers have died, but regardless of whether Frank is hurt by the whole thing, because I know he is, and that's horrible, but besides that, they are great films. They're very funny films, and it's absolutely brilliant that they got Brett from Flight of Conchords to do the songs, because they're some of the highlights of the films. So yeah, I love all that. I'm always intrigued to see what they do next, and I love the fact that that idea of the legacy of the Muppets and Jim Henson's legacy. The last thing they did, and I think it's the last thing, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, I think the last big project they did was the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance on Netflix, and that was brilliant. That was absolutely brilliant. That was headed by Lisa Henson, who's the current company runner. She currently runs the company, Lisa Henson. For ages it was Brian Henson, and he was the one that commissioned Farscape, which I'll get to later. But yeah, Lisa Henson was in charge of the new version of the Dark Crystal, which is absolutely brilliant. If you haven't seen it, watch it. It's fantastic. So in the 80s, I mean, the Jim Henson Company, you know, through the eyes of Jim Henson, through his activity and his plans, you had Fraggle Rock, you had the Dark Crystal, you had Labyrinth, which is a masterpiece, I think, and you also had because of the Dark Crystal, you had the invention of the Creature Shop, and the Creature Shop were used in lots and lots of films, like the one about Alice in Wonderland. I've forgotten now what it is, about an old Alice looking back. Can't remember what it's called. And Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, all sorts of different films. They used the Creature Shop for their effects, for their makeup, which is awesome. And that was all in the 80s. And then, sadly, on May the 16th in 1990, tragically, Jim Henson died. So he left the company to his 5 children, because he'd already separated with his wife Jane, and those 5 children have done all sorts with the company and made it still thrive and survive and grow with keeping his vision alive. So, you know, you've got the Dinosaurs sitcom. Don't know if you ever saw that, but that was a big thing in the 90s. That was thanks to what they continued. He had started it. He was involved in the start of it, but they made that complete and they put it on the TV. It was really big, and you've got Farscape, obviously, that was Brian Henson's idea, and that's my all-time favourite programme, so clearly I think that was a good job. And you also had Bear in the Big Blue House. That was a massive hit as well. But they did all sorts of different things, and all the Muppet movies, like Muppet Christmas Carol, which is probably the most popular Muppet movie, and that was done after he died. And Treasure Island, and all those other ones that happened in between. I wasn't that fond of the Wizard of Oz one, to be fair. I watched it again, but I think that's one of the weaker things they've done. But you know, as a whole, I think their output's amazing. So that's how their legacy continued, and that's my little sort of summary of the man and his company. So let's have a look at some of the books I've got that are about him. My favourite book, which if you ever get a chance to see it, is an awesome book, Jim Henson, The Works. And this has got some really good details about his life and his career, and it's also got some really nice illustrations in it as well. You know, it's not just a sort of the worst kind of coffee table book where there's hardly any writing, because there are some pages that's just writing. So obviously they are taking the book seriously, but you've also got some great illustrations from the sets and things like that, photos from the sets and that kind of thing. You know, yeah, illustrations is the wrong word. Photos, lots of photos from the set, and you've got, like, you know, their period on Saturday Night Live, which is the first thing they properly did on TV, which is interesting, isn't it? It's an adult thing. We got all those characters there from the Saturday Night Live sketches. So yeah, I mean, it's a great book. Jim Henson, The Works. If you get a chance to, really nice. If you get a chance to find that, it's a really good book about Jim Henson's output and the company as a whole. So that's Jim Henson, The Works. There's a really good biography that came out a few years ago here by Brian J. Jones. And it's a nice full biography that covers loads and loads of detail about his growing up and his university life and the first things he did, and obviously the Muppets and Sesame Street, as any. Yeah, I mean, really good biography, really full biography that is definitely worth having if you're interested in Uncle Jim. This is a really nice book about the Creature Shop, no strings attached. The inside story of Jim Henson's Creature Shop. So this goes into a lot of detail about what they've done. Oh my God, I forgot to mention the storyteller. When I went through that biography bit, I didn't mention the storyteller, which is one of my favourite things that the company's ever done, with Sprocket there. No, Sprocket's from Fraggle Rock, isn't it? Can't remember what the dog in Storyteller's called. But anyway, yeah, phenomenal what they've done over the years. And if you haven't seen The Storyteller, you must see it. In the UK, it's on Amazon Prime. Don't know where you can find it in America, but it is on Amazon Prime in the UK. Storyteller, amazing. And then he did another one straight after called Greek Myths. So one of the lovely things about The Storyteller is John Hurt playing the storyteller who narrates it. He does an amazing job. And Michael Gambon does the narration in Greek Myths. So that wasn't shown as much, so you might not have seen that one. But The Storyteller is an amazing show. So that was No Strings Attached, which is a book about the Creature Shop. Now we get into some really juicy stuff with these next two books are really interesting things that focus on Jim. So Imagination Illustrated, the Jim Henson Journal. This is an amazing book where it's got his sketches and his ideas, and you know, his ideas about how to do the puppetry. You've got, but yeah, these are definitely his sketches about storyboarding. That's definitely a sketch of his for a character design. Really interesting. Some ideas there he had for Big Bird. Yeah, this is just a fantastic book of his ideas. So the man was full of ideas. I mean, you know, I think he was one of the few people you can call a genius, certainly in my lifetime. And these are all his ideas in this book. It was a really, really good book. Imagination Illustrated. And then similarly, you've got Designs and Doodles, which is subtitled A Muppet Sketchbook. And this is his sketches. And this is the last page there, dust cover page. It's his sketches that obviously turned into real life things there. So these are, yeah, puppet designs for Ernie and Bert there, which is fascinating stuff. So yeah, this is just a gorgeous book with his, I mean, if you're into, it's not just the puppetry, is it? If you're just into sort of cartoonists and designs and illustrators and stuff like that, then I mean, this is something that I'm not sure what film it turns into, but this is to the victor become the spoils, and this is obviously them dragging a dragon somewhere, but that looks cool. And again, something you wouldn't necessarily be able to see if this book didn't exist. So I mean, I love stuff like this. Some of our Christmas decorations are this sort of thing. Like, so anyway, yeah, Designs and Doodles, Jim Henson, an amazing book, which I thoroughly recommend. Okay, so 2 books about Sesame Street. So this is a biggie, and sadly I've lent other books on top of it, so that bit's a bit knackered now, which is a shame. But it's a really nice, hefty, big book that I remember was really expensive at the time. But it goes into a lot of details about the people who worked on it, the actors, you know, the different developments in it. This is more colourful and kind of the illustrations and the text is probably half and half, but it's a really good book. You got some script stuff there. It goes into a lot of detail, especially considering there's so many illustrations. So yeah, this is a really good book on the history of the 40s. This was released 40 years after Sesame Street came out, so like a 40-year book. So yeah, so that's Sesame Street. But this is a really interesting one because this is more of a sort of text-based book. There's no illustrations in this, I don't think. Is there any illustrations in this? Oh, there's a few photos in the middle, but basically this is more of a sort of academic approach to the complete history of Sesame Street, Street Gang. It's an amazing book, and definitely recommend this. It's a really, really interesting read, and it tells you the whole history of how it was created and how they came to our Children's Television Workshop and the Muppet team worked together, and how it developed and how huge it is, because it's such a massive worldwide phenomenon. So yeah, Street Gang, the complete history of Sesame Street. I think this is the book that had somebody saying, oh, I'd like to know more about these Muppet books, and that's a really interesting little book, very cheap little book, but it's a lovely book that really illustrates Jim Henson's philosophy on life and his attitude to what he did creatively. It's not easy being green, and other things to consider. And it's kind of things that Jim Henson said, and some of his kind of catchphrases, some of the things he said on set, some of the things that other people have said about him, and it's just, it really illustrates what a beautiful man he was and what an important positive influence he was on the world. I mean, when I said earlier that he was a unique man, there was nobody I can think of that had his kind of creativity, his sort of versatility, his positivity, his absolute love of life, and his really strong desire to make a difference in the world. One of his famous quotes is him saying that he just wishes that he leaves the planet a better place than what it was when he started, and that he had an influence on that kind of thing. I mean, you know, as far as his attitude and his place in the world and his importance and his legacy and what he represented, it's so important. And now, you know, things are so cynical and so negative and so sort of depressing sometimes, and we need Jim Henson and his spirit and his attitude and his philosophy around so much. So yeah, this is a lovely book that has some of that in there, and you can dip into it, and he can make you smile 30 years after he left us. Some more books to finish off with. So I've had this book a long time. I'm pretty sure I bought this, or had it bought for me when Labyrinth came out. So I was a teenager when Labyrinth came out, which is clearly ideal. That's probably why I love it so much. But I'm pretty sure I got this for Christmas that year, and it's such an incredible book. I love this so much. So it's one of my oldest books I've got, and it's The Goblins of Labyrinth by Brian Froud. So Brian Froud designed the creatures in The Dark Crystal, and he also designed the creatures in Labyrinth. And he's an amazing illustrator, and some of the illustrations in this book are just unbelievable. So you might recognise Agnes from the film Labyrinth. She appears at the end. She's going, "Oh, you like your stuff, don't you?" And she's giving Sarah loads of extra stuff. And the idea is it's a distraction from what she should be caring about. And obviously, I mean, the way he draws is just phenomenal, isn't it? I could stare at these drawings forever. Brian Froud's released loads of other books, so there's clearly a collection that needs to happen. But in the meantime, this was the first book I had by him, and it's such a wonderful book. It's just amazing. I just say, they're like the sort of cannonball type things at the end of the big battle. I remember in the documentary, Jim Henson said he wanted to make a battle at the end, but he didn't want it to be a violent battle. He wanted it to be a silly battle, which it is. It's ridiculous and wonderful. So yeah. Brian Froud, Goblins Labyrinth. This dates back. I don't know how easy it would be for you to find this. This dates back to 1986. So I was 15, and the text is actually written by Terry Jones as well. So Terry Jones, he wrote the screenplay of the film Labyrinth. Don't know if you know much about Terry Jones. He's another one of my favourite people. He's one of the Monty Python team, and if you're not massively an expert on Monty Python, he's the one that dresses up as women a lot, and he plays Brian's mum in Life of Brian, Mandy. That's Terry Jones. And what else is he probably most famous for? He also did in Holy Grail. He's the knight going, "How do you know she's a witch?" and all that. But I mean, they all played various characters in the films. But Terry Jones was an amazing man, and he wrote the screenplay for Labyrinth. So yeah, if you can find this, it's an absolute gem of a book, The Goblins of Labyrinth. And just as a little companion thing, if you do want to keep buying Brian Froud's books, he did a great one called Fairies, which is again that sort of thing that I was just talking about, with his great illustrations, but not necessarily in the context of the film Labyrinth, and it's more just his ideas. So again, if you're into illustration and you love Brian Froud's style, then this could be another book you could get. And you might want to start collecting Brian Froud books. So Fairies by Brian Froud is another great book. And then to finish off, just because I've already done a video on Farscape, so if you are curious about Farscape and you haven't watched it properly yet, then do watch it and watch my video on it to whet your appetite. But these official companions are really good. So there's 4 of them. Obviously, there's 4 series, and I've got them all, but these are only 2 I thought was worth showing quick as what was the benefit of showing all 4. So I've got the other 2 somewhere, but these official companions are really cool because it goes into a lot of detail about the different episodes. So they're worth having as well. So yeah, that's my highlights of the stuff I've got on Jim Henson and the Creature Shop and Jim Henson Company and the Muppets and that sort of stuff. So yeah, if you're thinking, what is this Muppet thing? I've never seen a Muppet show, and you've got Disney Plus especially, then watch some Muppets because it will make you smile. And if you haven't got Disney Plus, there's loads of stuff on YouTube. There's like best of Muppets and stuff like that, best of Sesame Street. There's all sorts of things like that, and it's definitely worth watching because genuinely, everybody loves the Muppets because it always makes you smile, and the songs are brilliant, and it's very clever, very funny. The puppetry is incredible. I mean, that's one of the things that is interesting about his career, that he was doing all sorts of. He's always challenging himself to do extra things puppetry wise, and some of the challenges he met when he was doing the films and some of the things he did with the Creature Shop really pushed puppetry to a different level. So that's part of the reason why some of the creatures in Farscape are so bizarre, because they'd advanced puppetry so much, and all the animatronics they were doing is kind of linked to that. So yeah, Jim Henson, what a man. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Boo! Boo! That was the worst thing I ever heard.
It was terrible.
Horrendous.
Well, it wasn't that bad.
Oh, yeah?
There were parts of it I liked.
Yeah, I liked a lot of it.
Yeah, it was good.
It was great.
It's wonderful.